reunion I've been wanting to do for quite some time, and I'm really glad that we're able to do that. Please help me welcome Rusty Schwimmer. Rusty? Jeff. Rusty Schwimmer?
Oh, yeah. Oh, hi.
Thank you.
He's a little rusty.
I'm so sorry. I'm completely out of my mind. Where am I sitting, honey? Right here? Because, like, the really important people are coming over there. I didn't want to say anything to you, but they're real.
Next up is her first time also at Monster-Mania, Virginia Madsen.
Hi everybody, thanks for staying. So happy to see all your faces. Now the man you're waiting for.
And you can't have a Candyman reunion without the Candyman. Please welcome Tony Todd.
It's very warm in here and we've had a long day. We're all going to be wide awake and excited, right?
Who's having a little bit of a schwitz going on? Right?
Rusty, I saw what, 3 years ago or so. Virginia, how long has it been? I know
Since we made Candyman, it was
No,
like 3.5
since-
years ago.
Yes. For you.
Well, when I was
But you were
17.
supposed to be in many places. But never. So
I know.
thank you,
This is the
Dave,
first
for
time we've
getting
ever
us
been together.
finally together.
Thank you for coming.
It means a lot to us.
You were working on a movie and then I
You
was
were
working on a
series.
movie. Yeah.
You were working on a
I was finding you.
But I keep seeing your brother.
Yes, you've seen Michael.
We actually work.
Okay, so we'll do, as we always do, if you have a question, please raise your hand. And we'll get started. Who wants to go first? Right there?
Oh, there he goes.
They're gonna get Candyman 4?
Don't answer that.
You know, I'm not a mind reader. That talk was active in the last 10 years or so, every 2 years. My other bright idea and so forth. But there are too many people that own the rights to the movie. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into all this. There's at least 4 different owners that will not acquiesce to the other person. You know, it's crazy. We feel like Hollywood was weak. But we love it. We love what we do.
Who else has a question? Over here.
This is for Tony Todd. Which one was your favorite Candyman to do?
The one with these people, for God's sake!
What's wrong with you?
Kidding me?
Just checking.
They should have made action figures for all of us, and then.
I know they only made an action figure for you.
But we could have
And then we
all,
could have made action
moments of
figures and,
despair,
like,
we could
you
have
know.
all put them out and say, it's good to see you again.
And then our kids could have played with
Play
them.
with them, we all, you know.
And
life
like,
goes
my
on.
little guy could have arrested you guys.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Wow.
Keep the handcuffs to yourself.
Right. Who's
Let's
next?
make it crazy, guys. So like, and it's hot in
Question.
here.
Come on, don't be shy, people.
Who has a question? Right here.
Yes.
What did you think when you first saw the script? You got the script first thought?
Well, it was so beautifully written, and I've been a lifelong fan of the horror genre, horror, sci-fi, fantasy, and I was always looking, but I could never find a script that I felt was really smart and had a really strong female figure, and I loved that it was a love story, and Candyman was so poetic, and he was sort of like this beautiful, almost like a Dracula kind of figure, and a new figure never seen before. And I'm from Chicago, so it was so appealing to me, and just because it was really beautifully written.
One day, there's about 10 minutes of missing footage in this film. One day, they gave it release. Because a lot of people miss the fact that it's a gothic love story.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and
Most importantly.
absolutely. And one day that footage will be rediscovered. You'll see exactly. Remember, we shot this incredible scene in Lair on this magical turntable. It was a plexiglass turntable. So the illusion was that we were floating in air as we finally.
Yeah, we were dancing and waltzing, and we learned how to waltz together.
Yes, we did. We
And-
did waltzing lessons.
Yeah, we could do dancing in the sky. And we had this turntable, and we were turning and floating and flying. It was so beautiful.
But the
And
studio wanted to cut to the gore
Yeah.
more.
And it's like, you can understand it was, you know, the exciting stuff, but this was beautiful. And I think that people who really love Candyman and really follow this story would long to see that, you know, they would have loved that. So, but we got to do it.
We got to do it. We met each other.
And he's a beautiful dancer, by the way.
You know, Virginia was the last cog in my wheel to playing that part. She was like a silent producer. Remember when we went to lunch somewhere in Monster-Mania? We had green soup with little yellow plum tomatoes in it. Remember that?
Ladies and gentlemen, they're having a moment.
And she said yes, and that was great. So thank you, Virginia, for not a day goes by with somebody shopping at Whole Foods or wherever. There are sometimes just a dozen crowds where they don't come up to me. Thank you very much for that. It was a wonderful experience.
Yes.
What was it like working with Clive Barker?
Well, we didn't really work with Clive Barker because this is based on a short story by Clive. And Bernard Rose, the director, wrote the screenplay based on the short story. And so Clive came to visit us a couple times on the set. He was so happy with the world
Beaming.
yeah, he was beaming. He was so thrilled, and it was really exciting to meet him. And I don't know if I expected him to be this dark gothic, Clive Barker, but he was like, hey, and he was so happy with, the
Then you
world.
see his art.
Yeah. What?
Then you see his art.
Yeah, and then you're like, what's in there, man?
But
Yeah.
and more credit needs to be given to Bernard Rose. Who
Yeah, he created this world.
Yeah.
He created Candyman.
diabolically brilliant. And early film we did is called Paper House.
Oh.
That's what's so
So
good. His work.
You have to
If you haven't
see
seen
Paper
that,
House.
Look at that and you see the elements of what we did.
Yeah.
That's
And he
one of
had
the
an eye
scariest
for
movies
kids.
ever made. Totally, that and Suspiria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paper House. And also, really didn't make people go through too many dances. I remember I got a call and somebody said, somebody wants you to consider this thing called Candyman. And I did this movie in Africa, and he said he was convinced that I was a face. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And then, sometimes you're born to do something.
Did you have one in the back? Very back?
Something weird ever happened with someone saying Candyman in the mirror? You're gonna come in.
Well, I didn't. If you watched the film, I would not say it 5 times in the mirror.
Yeah, I noticed that when someone else went with any.
Yeah, like they cut to another angle, or Casey and I looked at, and then I said it the 5th time, because I don't know, I'm superstitious. I didn't want to tempt the fates.
Right here?
This is for each of you. Is there a special moment that the 3 of you, either together or, in combination, shared behind the scenes that really resonates, that just pops into your mind as like your best memory of working on this?
Well, what Tony was saying when we were dancing, and that was, I think, the most beautiful memory of the whole thing. And Rusty and I grew up together. I don't know if you guys know that.
Wow.
And so she's my best friend. And at the time when I had to do that scene where I'm all covered with blood and I have to take my bra off. And
Good times.
and I didn't want a stranger, I didn't know how someone was going to react because I was going to play it really dark and I was going to be shivering and crying and I didn't want to freak somebody out. And so Rusty, you know, came in to do that scene specifically as a favor to me, and so I feel protected and I could, you know, fall into pieces and I'd be fine because she would be there. And so she played it just so perfectly.
Well, if you remember correctly, Bernard was like, don't say anything to her. Don't say anything to her between takes. Don't do anything.
Yeah,
Just be mean to her. Be mean to her.
I was like, we can act that, but
Yeah.
we don't need to really.
Yeah, I mean, especially since we did shows in high school together.
Yeah.
Come on, right? Yeah.
And I said I kind of need the levity a little bit between takes, but he wanted us to be more, whatever.
More like
He was
method.
very demanding. I mean,
He was
did you
demanding,
ever see
yeah,
one of
he
the
was very-
secrets that you did?
Oh, when he hypnotized me.
Yeah, this one was hypnotized with every single scene that Candyman did.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to ask you, because crew couldn't stand that he, you know, would take 10, 15 minutes to do
I
this.
know.
Did he put you under a spell?
Yeah, he did.
He did, so you were
Well,
upset.
we were both before the movie started, you know, the idea that when Dracula sees his victims, and you know how they always go under some sort of spell, and he wanted that kind of thing, that would happen to his victims. And that it was this beautiful, sensual, romantic trance. And so we went to a hypnotist to see what it was like to be hypnotized. And I was like, I'm just not gonna be able to. And then suddenly my arm was raising and they were like, you can wake up, and I was like, ouch. And so it turned out I was really susceptible to hypnotism. I was very, very easily hypnotized. So Bernard then was just maniacal. He was just like, I don't understand how to do that. And so he did, and so it took, like, he took a whole course on it, and then I didn't think it would ever work, but what he was fascinated by is that when I was hypnotized, that I looked very different, and that my eyes looked different, and I looked very glassy, and it was just like exactly. So it didn't work towards the end of the film, but for most of, like, when we first met, and for most of those scenes, that's, you know, what worked, and so it was really interesting. And I think, yeah, I mean, it was hard for the crew because we'd go over in a corner somewhere, and then he'd walk me out. The whole thing looked a little actory, but it was actually real. You know.
He stuck to the path.
Yeah, he did.
And I'll never forget, I think one of the first things we shot was in the parking garage.
Yeah.
It was, to this
Yeah.
day, is one of my favorite.
It was so beautiful, and your clothes were so beautiful, and your shoes, and you were totally hot. He was stunning, and still is, right? Yes.
Right here.
First, a comment for Virginia. It's awesome to have you here because Sideways is probably one of my favorite non-horror films.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, it's kind of a comment, but it's also a question. How does it feel to be part of a very groundbreaking horror movie? Because up until then, like me being like the age I was, everything like horror was like remote white teenagers getting chased down, and this kind of made it an urban horror movie that you never really see. And it featured, you know, African American kind of storylines.
Well, it played on lots of different stereotypes as well as unexpected visuals, you know, and it was, you know, it's sort of like everything. And I think after Candyman, you know, they made a horror movie called Urban Legend. I mean, it became a topic of conversation and sort of its own verbiage. And so I thought that there would be more discussion. I think we all did, like after the film, there would be more discussion about race, racism, things that we are afraid of in the city, things that we're afraid of in our modern day lives. But none of that really came up. Everyone just, because I think everyone just fell under the trance of Candyman in the audience, and they fell in love with him. And so anything that was like a political issue sort of went by the wayside. But if you really study the film, all those issues are there. And I mean, for instance, when Casey Lemons and I go into the housing project, there's a whole vibe between her and Vanessa, because Vanessa was the mother that has the child that's stolen. And they are two very different colors. And so there's a little bit of attitude, and when Vanessa says at one point, we don't get a lot of white folks around here, and she doesn't look at me, she looks directly at Casey, because Casey's a light-skinned African-American. So there was a whole, and they brought that into the story, which was really interesting, because at that age, I had never really heard about that particular issue, and, you know, in the African-American community. And so it was their opportunity to put a little bit of that in there. And the fact that Bernard thought it was interesting that, you know, I was the brave one going in, whereas the African American was the one who was really apprehensive about going into the projects. And so there was a lot of that, you know, there's so many layers to this film, but that, I like that little conflict there between me and them.
Over here.
Candyman is one of the most complete films in the horror genre in decades. My question is actually for each one of you. The practical effects side of it, the bees, the blood, those kind of things. Talk a little bit about dealing with that and being prepped for bees and having really a lot of practical effects.
You have to.
Yeah, well, first of all, those bees, there's no CGI. Well, there's no CGI in the opening of the swarm of bees and stuff over the city. In terms of our stuff, I had to have these little, they built a dental dam for me. We had this wonderful bee wrangler on the set, one would get it. And you would think it would be more sophisticated, but it took a dustpan, and said, ready? And dropped it, and then I would have to hold on and release that. But when I read the script, that's one of the things that really stuck out to me. Is that's never been seen on film. And win, lose, fail, succeed or not, that moment is going to be indicted. We also had a brilliant DP, Tony Richmond. Among other things, David Bowles from Earth. We had Philip Glass's music. We had Chicago, one of the best cities in the world. We had good-looking people in the movie. We had Bernard. We had Clive's original story. We were working on all cylinders. And lots of that.
Yeah, but that was, I mean,
Good
that was,
food.
well, Bernard wanted me to put on weight. So remember, he was constantly feeding me.
Wow.
He was like bringing in pizzas and lunch, and he was constantly.
You kept
Like,
putting me in a girl.
oh, see if he had had me.
You would go that plexiglass turntable.
Okay. In the last row in the back.
How do you guys feel about the score from Philip Glass?
Oh, it was beautiful. That was the first time. He said he would never, he didn't want to do ever music for movies. And Bernard pursued him, and he, no. And so he actually stalked him. They like showed up at his house.
Which is so Bernard.
Yeah, so Bernard. He was
Yeah.
like, I'm going to go ahead. It's an incredible film. It's a big black man with a hook. It's amazing. And Philip Glass was like, oh, God. So, no, he showed up at his house, and he gave him his film Paper House, and which I understand he was really fascinated by. But he brought him a lot of photo studies of Chicago, and he, really talked to him about that it was a Gothic love story. And he, you can't turn down Bernard. He just talks, he's courageous, and he so believed in what he was doing. He talks you into things. So Philip said yes, and now of course he's done other films as well.
Yeah, I think he also, Philip Glass's music really put you in the mood immediately. And you knew, oh no, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was amazing.
It really was.
Okay. Over here.
Hi. Candyman was an amazing Gothic love story, and of course you mentioned that shortly after that, urban legend came out. Shortly after that, what we'd like to know is what are each of your favorite urban legends?
Well, I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, and lower middle class, and our street was surrounded by graveyards. But we didn't, you know, because we were so close to one, we didn't really have any homes on it. So we played football there, we chased squirrels, romantic adventures, so maybe all that prepared me. But I remember. Oh, Jesus. At least being on the picture now, something. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, we'll talk later.
Friday nights, we used to like chase the drunks who would like walk around and stuff until one day we heard something, you know, and put it into it. Everybody had a different perception of what it was in the song, but it was like, you guys, you kids, like, toyed around with this territory for too long. It's one of those kind of contradictory.
Oh, yeah. Urban legend, Rusty?
Well, we were, you know, it was Shakespeare Gardens at Northwestern.
Yeah, but we made that up because we were stoned.
You did not hear that. For God's sakes. Yeah, someone was throwing rocks at us.
We also had a place that we believed was haunted on the campus of Northwestern University.
In Evanston, Illinois.
And it was this little tiny garden with a giant Shakespeare bust at the front, and we were always convinced that something was going on there.
And then he was going to come alive.
Yeah.
And then one of our friends went right
Well, I would
behind
sort of
it.
do that. I'd go behind it and go, who should? You know, and I pulled it off though a couple of
You
times.
did, but it was Dan or Ellery.
Yeah, but that's because they, you know, that's because she was stoned.
Yeah. Rocks were thrown at her. Yeah.
I think there was a lot of urban legends in Chicago when it came to various, you know, there's a lot of that kind of lore, ghost stories in Chicago. But Cabrini Green, the housing project, which thankfully is now obliterated, it's gone, it's not even dust. It was a terrible blight on our city, and it was right next to, it was downtown.
Yeah.
It was right next to it. And it was really, you know, most people who lived there were families, but it was an out of control place that
It just wasn't,
It was very dangerous.
The police force had given up on it.
Yeah.
They'd given up
And
on
there
these
were
lovely
those
people.
tunnels, those existed throughout the building that went from apartment to apartment because it was really cheap construction, and those, you know, the mirrored medicine cabinets that you could actually see through to the next apartment, that was all really there.
Yeah.
So there was always, people would make up stories that weren't really true about what was living in there and what happened there. Like every story that happened, you know, if there was violence there, if there was, you know, a gang shooting, suddenly there was like a, you know, everyone was like 6 people were shot, and it's like, no, that's not really true. But it was a dangerous, sad place that a lot of families really survived and lived in for many years. Generations of families lived there and called it home. So when we got there, it was, you know, we walked in on this kind of
It was
real
the end
community.
of Cabrini Green.
It was the end of Cabrini Green, yeah.
Yeah.
And so and what was interesting is that somebody put a couple of bullets into the generator on the first day. Did you know that?
I didn't hear that story.
And so Bernard, being sort of the maniacal Englishman that he was, you know, there was a couple of gangs. They were not happy that we didn't ask permission. We were there. And so these guys were all sort of hanging out one day, sort of made themselves known and were flashing their gang signs. And the cops were, you know, sort of getting uptight. And Bernard just was like, oh, look, it's a gang. And so he takes off over there, and they're like, oh, God, here it goes. And he was like, oh, hello. And he was like, listen, you're a gang. It's fantastic. And he sort of told a little fib. Now I'm paraphrasing, but he was, and they were like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, you see, I'm from London. We don't have racism in England. And we don't have gangs. And I'm just fascinated. Amazing. I'm trying to be in the film. And they were all kind of like, sure. And all of a sudden, they became teenagers, which is really what they were.
Yeah.
And so they're the guys, they're the teenagers when Casey and I are going into the building that are kind of hassling us. So then everything was fine, you know, once we, and Bernard was absolutely right. You know, once we made friends and, you know, and then we met other people that were in the building. We weren't there for very long. You know, we were only there for a few days, but, you know, then it was, everything became human. We became human to them, and we had no trouble at all. None at all.
Okay, who else has a question? In the back?
For a horror film, what is the most logistical difficulty you had to deal with? Two things. What is the most logistical difficulty? Was it makeup or bees or whatever? Second of all, Virginia, could I buy you a drink sometime?
Look at that.
Well, we can discuss that afterwards. No, I'm blushing.
Yeah.
I don't know, what was the most difficult thing for you? The bees?
Yeah, probably the bees, but
That hook, though.
the hook was difficult too because we had to get it just right with the coat. You know,
Right, there's always problems.
Always, I thought I was going to lose the length of my arm forever. Yeah, but I love the project. I mean, it was a great script. You know, I'm only in 10 minutes of the film, but it's 10 minutes I won't.
You're not in, it's more than 10 minutes.
I don't care into the first 40 minutes.
Wow, like Alien.
Yeah, I'm just talking. It's the best build up in the world. The first time you see it is in Paramount.
Oh, cool. I never really thought about
I
that.
mean, I was there on the set.
Yeah.
Be there dressing look. Oh, talking about Rich and Lemons, we shot this at Propaganda Studios in Hollywood, which used to be the very beautiful studio.
Yeah, they shot whatever happened to Baby Jane there.
Right.
Our son was constantly looking for their ghosts.
I didn't know that.
Very good. The place was haunted.
So did I.
Yeah.
With Betty.
It's probably with
But-
Joe. I'm sure Betty moved on.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it
Great
was.
studio.
Yeah, it was really nice too. It was very intimate because we had it all, sort of all to ourselves, and it was.
Good place to show up.
Yeah. The bees were a little bit of a challenge for me because I'm allergic to bee stings. And Bernard didn't believe me, thought I was trying to chicken out. So he had me go to UCLA and get tested to see exactly how allergic I was. And so they wouldn't insure me. But so when we did the bee scenes, you know, this does not exactly instill confidence. And when you grow up with a bee allergy, you learn to not be afraid of bees because the last thing you want to do is run or swat them around, which you probably most likely get stung. And so all of a sudden we show up the day that he's going to have all the bees in the lair, and they've got all these nets all over the place, and all the crew members had scarves. They were all like so afraid of the bees. They were more nervous, and then there's like a paramedic thing, you know, there's an ambulance and paramedics standing by, and I was like, great, I feel really confident about this now. And of course, nothing happened to me, but you got stung.
Yeah, you remember Norman
You're
kept
so cool about it.
saying, he said that these are baby bees and therefore they're stimulus and stuff.
Yeah, but you had the flying bees on
Yeah, I had
you.
the flying bees inside the coat, and that's stung.
And your head, you got stung on your
Yes,
head
I
too.
know. Bring it back.
But they loved me. They loved me and they never stung me.
Well, I had problems with the plastic gloves.
Okay, who else has a question? Right here.
I was wondering, Tony, could you give us a hell?
People have done that to me in parking garages and I do not appreciate it. I'm serious, and I don't find it funny or amusing. I really don't. Like, people think that's just going to be hilarious to me, and I'm like, and I So if my car's in a garage, I always get escorted to my car. If it's one of those kind of garages, I'm like, no, it's
Yeah,
not
you're always
gonna
like,
be- it's not gonna be funny to me.
Okay, right here in the front row.
So if all the rights could be released and worked out, where would you want to see Candyman and the franchise today? Where would you want to see it taken if everything could be really worked out?
You know, 10 years ago I was actively interested in doing it. Now I'm not so much anymore. Cleveland, I just did a play. I do a lot of theater, right? I did a play in Denver, Colorado. It was fantastic working there. And I worked with Cleveland Derricks, originated in the world, James Thunder.
Yeah.
And he told me something very interesting. He says, I said, Cleveland, do you ever go back to New York? Because they were doing all these reviews. He says, man, I don't look back, I look forward. And those words really meant something to me. I mean, I was doing that anyway, but to hear somebody else say it meant a lot to me. We don't control our destiny in Hollywood. Something else.
Yeah, I think we're the only art that has to rely on other people to let us do it. And so it's hard to, it's the powers that be and how films are financed nowadays. It's just so not up to us, and for the most part, not up to Americans. Like American cinema has really sort of been hijacked and it's been taken away from our artists and our filmmakers because so much of the financing has to do with foreign financing, foreign sales, corporations. That's why we don't see more Westerns, and so I'm not happy with that, but I think what would be really, really cool is if, Tony and I should certainly be paired together. We should certainly work together. I think it'd be wonderful if we did theater together, because I haven't done theater in so many years. So, I'm surprised that no one's ever somehow brought us together, in something else. But if it's meant to be, it will. But, yeah, but I'd certainly love to work with
Who else has a question?
That's awesome.
Over here.
One more serious question that I had for Virginia Madsen. How was it working with that young boy that was helping you out around the neighborhood?
Oh, that little man had such attitude. He was so, I thought this kid is going to be a star. He had this, and when I say he had attitude, he wasn't a brat. He was a little bratty. No, I'll tell you what he did. He was walking around, he just knew everybody, and he walked into my trailer without knocking. No, he did. Yes, he walked into, and this is a little boy who's like 9 years old. He walked up and down my trailer. He looked all around and he goes, well, so I have one question for you, Virginia. And I go, and what is that? And he goes, why don't I have a trailer like this? And I went, well, if you work hard, one day you probably will. And he was like, do you mind if I bring my people in here? And I said, okay. So all of a sudden, like his family and his agent, and all of a sudden everybody comes in and he starts telling them, and then it became his trailer. I was like, he did play his cards right. And it was his trailer. He was just like there the whole time. But he was very precocious, but he was really talented, and I just had a feeling about him because he was so intelligent. He was like a little prodigy. And I kept thinking, oh, I'm going to see him like in something. So I don't really know what happened to him, but I was very impressed by him. He was an unusual child, for sure. and he was smart. He took my trailer, so
Right here.
I wonder if you could comment on what you thought Xander Berkeley brought to the movie and what it was like working with him.
Oh, Xander. Xander Berkeley, who's been in so many movies.
So many.
And Xander, you know, he kind of had a thankless role in a way because he was just playing, you know, very unsympathetic, philandering husband. And I just love that he was the actor who was willing to do that. I think he was not happy with the scene when I came back to the apartment and I threw the paint everywhere. He wasn't comfortable that day, I think, because I really sort of took over and he didn't imagine the scene. I think he wanted to be more sympathetic to Helen, and Bernard wanted him to be completely unsympathetic, and he wanted him to be afraid. I think it was really important that there was a turn there to where he became afraid of Helen. And that was hard for him to play, but he did it. And I never ended up working with him again. I run into him lots of times, but, you know, yeah, so he went with it. He went with it. I think he was afraid I was going to throw the paint on him. I kind of wanted to. Maybe that's why he thought I was going to throw the paint on him.
And that was good, because then he was all freaked out.
That he was afraid.
Yeah.
Right here.
Question for Virginia. Were you ever considered working with your brother?
Of course, but a lot of people don't know that Michael Madsen's my brother. And when we were much younger and starting out, we used to get offers to play opposite one another. You know, because that's, you know, the way that we look and the way that, you know, we are on screen, we would be excellent starring opposite one another. But there's not a lot of scripts for brothers and sisters. There was a script a while ago where we were going to be like enemies, and I think that would have worked out really well. And we very much want to work together. We're close, and you know, it's very rare that we get anything that you know. He showed up to do a cameo in a film. We were in a movie called The Florentine where we had one scene together, but it was a really significant scene because we were talking about our father, and it really was kind of about our real life dad. And so yeah, we'd very much like to, you know, of course Michael is like, oh, we should do it. And I'm like, Michael! And then I'm 10 again. I'm like, Michael, we can't, that's, you know, he goes, no, incest, it's the last taboo, man. I'm gonna freak everybody out, man. It would fucking blow their mind. Oh God, people would be so upset. No, Michael, I can't, that's not gonna happen. We can fake it in a way. We can find a way to shoot it. No, Michael, no. He does, he likes to mess with people's heads.
Yes,
Okay, we'll take two last questions. Would like to go? In the back.
That mural that is all over the wall, that actually in the reader had a set.
Wait, what are you talking
about?
That was a set. That was a set because we. Yeah, those, like I was saying, those kind of tunnels did exist between apartments, but because of the way we needed to shoot where we had removable walls and the camera could fly on cranes and on strings, and so we had to have a controlled environment, so those kind of things in the interior, most of the real bowels of things were on a stage.
Okay, who has the last question? Right over there.
Thanks for enduring the heat, everybody.
Tony, I'm a fan of Farewell to the Flesh, the sequel. What are your thoughts on that?
I appreciated that, you know, because I tried to create a backstory for Candyman, and they took it and used a lot of it in Farewell to the Flesh. Plus, one of the weirdest things about that movie, one of the first things we shot was that Mardi Gras sequence. We were actually in New Orleans, and they recreated Mardi Gras. I couldn't believe it. It was sort of on set, and they had like...
That wasn't happening, Marty?
No, they recreated it. It was like 2 weeks or so after it, and they had 500 extras, and they spent all this money, and a lot of drag queens and stuff, and we kept going, don't touch me with that hook. I wasn't thinking about it, but That was great. So, you know, the third one went off the rails. That second one, we did pay attention to the fact that he was an artist and the fact that we were both descendants of this intimacy that we once had. It was pure love. Pure love.
Okay, guys.
Thank you guys for loving.
We're going to ask the